And a big welcome into the start of our week 20 of lcpioneers.com live, presented by PioStream, as we bring you connections with student athletes, coaches, alumni, and different members of the Lewis and Clark College community 4 days a week, Tuesday through Friday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific time, streaming live on Facebook at lcpioneers.com/live, and watch on demand at your leisure, youtube.com/lcpios. Hi, everyone. I'm Ryan Goff. I am the play by play voice and director of athletic communications for Lewis and Clark. We are the Pioneers out of Portland, Oregon, competing in the Northwest Conference, a 9 team conference amongst the NCAA Division III realm, competing with other teams from throughout the northwest part of Oregon and the state of Washington, and with over 430 institutions competing at the D3 level, a chance for our student athletes to compete on a nationwide scale. And as we'll talk about again, too, a lot of opportunities to study overseas, as our guest today had the chance to, for a little bit, do so with our overseas study program at Lewis and Clark. A lot of opportunities for a global reach as well. That guest is Michelle McGinn. We'll have her come in just a few moments. She is a rising junior for Lewis and Clark volleyball. They had an outstanding fall 2019 season, finished on an incredible high note over senior weekend, originally from Hawaii, and McGinn saw their lone senior, Blythe Ballesteros, leave on senior day, also from Hawaii. And so we'll talk about what makes Lewis and Clark a good fit for student athletes coming from Hawaii. Also, a little bit about Hawaii Club and a neat event that the Lewis and Clark volleyball Instagram story will have tomorrow, a takeover by one of McGinn's fellow teammates. So that'll be a pretty exciting moment too. She's also very much into sports media, so that's kind of right up my alley as well. I'm excited to talk to Michelle about that coming up in just a few moments. We encourage you to get involved with the show. You can comment in the Facebook Live comments. You can also email us anytime, sports@lclark.edu, whether you have a question for Michelle or a suggestion for any future guests, anything that you've seen that you've liked, anything you need us to know. Be sure to use those as you wish. That's sports@lclark.edu or in the Facebook Live comments below. And on that note, too, you can connect with us on Instagram and Twitter. Both platforms, our handle is LC Pioneers. So we definitely invite you to get a hold of us in either of those places. And excited to continue to announce incoming student athletes for the 2020-21 academic year. And right now at lcpioneers.com, we have announced both men's and women's tennis incoming student athletes, 3 for the women's team, 2 for the men's team, going to join head coach Jimmy Chow in his 3rd season upcoming as the head coach of the Lewis and Clark Pioneers. So be sure to check that out right now. That's at lcpioneers.com. And of course, as I mentioned, now week 20 of the show. So our playlist has continued to be updated at youtube.com/lcpios. We do have 3 live shows for you this week. We're going to take Thursday off and re-air a conversation we had with former Lewis and Clark rower Charlie Morgan. We'll do that on Thursday. I will give you the full guest lineup at the end of today's show. And so with that, let's bring in our guest for today. Again, an all Northwest Conference selection for Lewis and Clark volleyball. We welcome Michelle McGinn to lcpioneers.com live. Michelle, appreciate taking the time to join us early in the morning in Hawaii, and looking forward to talking to you about some of the things that are happening this upcoming year. And it certainly is going to look a lot differently with the coronavirus pandemic still in full swing. But before we start looking forward, let's take a look back. Lewis and Clark, this is the place that you chose to compete for Emily Hayes's volleyball program. What was it about the opportunity to come to Portland and compete for Lewis and Clark that really fit for you?
So on my journey of finding a school, I visited about like 7 other schools, and Lewis and Clark was like the 5th school I visited. And when I got there, I already liked Emily. I met her in Hawaii at a volleyball combine, and she told me it was over fall break, so there was barely anyone on campus, and I got to meet Monica San Nicolas. She was on campus, and I got toured around and everything. It's absolutely beautiful campus, and I kind of just like had a feeling that I wanted to spend my next 4 years here. I was interested in the growing volleyball program and the kind of large Hawaii community that we have. And when I was just walking around and hearing about our program and everything, I knew that I wanted to go to Lewis and Clark. And what really interested me was the study abroad program, which I went on last spring. and also how volleyball was like still kind of like a hobby and where school was like the biggest, most important thing. I like that.
So you talked about the overseas study program, and that was something that I knew you were looking forward to. The spring clearly didn't go how anyone imagined that it would. Give us perspective from someone who was not in the US at the time that everyone started having to move to remote. What was your experience like? How did you find out? Kind of walk us through that moment.
Yeah, so I was in Australia with about 16 other people from Lewis and Clark and one professor. And at the time, we were actually very remote from everything in Australia. We were like in the middle of nowhere, and we were seeing on social media that there was things about like the coronavirus and everything, but I guess like in the United States and in other parts of the world, people were getting a lot more information than we were. So when we were starting to see emails about like precautions that were being taken or like what was happening on campus, it was kind of getting us a little worried because we were so far away from home and like having to make like a last minute flight to get home to your families, or I'm in the middle of nowhere, how do I get home, was a little hectic. We actually left our program about a month earlier than we were supposed to. um, it was in the best interest of everyone, and we got there January 2nd, and then we left around like March 20th. So we got a good chunk of Australia in, but we did miss the ending. We were supposed to go to the Great Barrier Reef for about a week and a half, which I was really excited for, but it is what it is. And I was really happy that I got home when I did because of everything that was happening.
Well, and let's talk about, I mean, I lead with this idea of, adjusting to the pandemic, and clearly that's been a big part, certainly something I'm sure you'll remember from your time in college. But at the same time, you got to spend some time in this overseas study program. So while you missed out on the reef, what were some of the things that really stood out that you truly enjoyed about your time over there?
Yeah, so our first 4 weeks we were in Sydney, Australia, and we were staying in dorms at the University of Sydney, which was pretty neat. We got to explore the city, go on a bunch of field trips to all like the monuments and like all the places you go in Sydney, Australia. Um, and I think it was a lot of the experience was like being independent and being so far away from home where like you had to figure out everything on your own, and it was like a new place. Like Hawaii and Oregon, yeah, they're different, but it's still in the United States, and if I wanted to call, I could just get my parents up there or I could go, and like we had to battle with time differences too, and different currency exchange. Um, and then after those 4 weeks, we went and we had a host family in Brisbane. I loved my host family. I was with Abby, who used to be on the soccer team. I was with her, and we were with a host family with a single mom and her two kids. Beautiful house, beautiful family. We still keep in touch today. We would have a different professor every day on this study abroad program, and we learned all about Australia in regards to their healthcare, their education, like how the metro system runs, and all that kind of stuff. So it was pretty neat the things that we got to learn and how much like hands-on activities and projects we had.
Michelle McGinn joining us on lcpioneers.com live, a rising junior for Lewis and Clark volleyball. And so, given your circumstance, having to go from Australia back home, it's been a while since you've been back in Portland and at Lewis and Clark. I kind of asked you about why Lewis and Clark from maybe more of a volleyball perspective, but when you look at Portland accessibility to downtown, and then certainly the campus, what is it about that place that really stands out for you?
Well, for me, I I was looking for a place where I could like create myself and like become my independent person away from home. And in Portland, it's just it feels so like homey and comfortable, and I'm surrounded by a bunch of friends, and I also have some family up there as well. Um, and just like in Portland, it's beautiful, and like we're surrounded by nature all the time, and it's just a good place to be. And I'm happy that I chose Lewis and Clark to go to for my 4 years.
Well, and we're certainly glad you did too. On the volleyball floor, It's just incredible to watch you compete, Michelle. And Coach Hayes tries to describe your capabilities within all of the rotations, and I don't obviously still get it to this day, but it's amazing to know just how valuable you can be to this team. And clearly, last fall was a demonstration of what your team is capable of doing. What stands out from last season when you think about what your team accomplished?
Well, I definitely think we grew in regards to chemistry this past year a lot. I feel like just getting more reps and more touches, coming in for extra reps, and just working together as a team to get better was what really stood out in the whole season. I feel like it really showed in games, whether it was how close we are or it was how we just gelled so well on the court in regards to playing and like having like we have this saying in our team. It's like fun and focused. Like we have a little mix of both because we can't be focused all the time without any fun, you know? And so I feel like we just really came together this year and our mentality was that we were going to dominate or we were going to put our best foot forward and we are going to win as a team and lose as a team. And I think we did a really good job of that.
And obviously, some of the highlights that we've heard from some of your teammates had to do with that last weekend, as I mentioned in the top, defeating Whitworth and winning on senior night following a win over Whitman the night before. What was it about, that kind of game that really shows what your team is capable of? I mean, when you think back, what went right for your team to sweep that weekend?
It still feels like unreal and it's been like months and months since those games. And we always talk about them. It's like a lot of our favorite memories when it comes to our time at Lewis and Clark. Um, Throughout the whole season, we didn't have one weekend like this past season that we won both of our games. And that last weekend we had Whitman, which we had lost to earlier, and then we had Whitworth, which we lost to earlier as well in the season. And I think like our mentalities were like, we're gonna show them that we were more than what we showed earlier. Like we're gonna show that we grew, and that things are gonna be different. And it was, I mean, I still can't even describe it in words that second day when we played Whitworth. It was amazing. And those last couple points, I still watch them all the time. And it was just, I don't know, it was a good way for us to show Blythe how much we appreciated her on the team and how much you're going to miss her and how much we wanted her to go out with a bang. And so I just think that it was a good way to end the season, but a good way to start the next one. So, yeah.
You're watching lcpioneers.com live Tuesday through Friday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific time on Facebook Live and archived at youtube.com/lcpios. We're talking with Michelle McGinn, a rising junior for Lewis and Clark volleyball. And as I mentioned, the connection with Hawaii last year for including yourself from Hawaii on the team. You have two incoming student athletes this year who are also from Hawaii. Give us a look into Hawaii Club and some of the aspects of what you enjoy about having teammates from your home state on your team and what that means for you.
I think it's like, it's a really like comforting feeling that like I have Kayla, Anella, and now we have Katie, and we have Kelsey coming in. It feels really good that like I have people from here. Like Hawaii's really different in regards to all the other states, and leaving home is different because we've all went to school here all our lives, and it's a change to be away so far from home. We can't just drive home like everyone else can. Um, and then we have the football team that has a bunch of Hawaii players as well, and we all get along so well. We have softball, we have basketball, so and we also have baseball. Um, it's just a comforting feeling that we have so many Hawaii kids that chose to go to Lewis and Clark and follow their dreams of continuing to play collegiate sports. And on top of that, we do have Hawaii Club, which almost all of us are in, I'm pretty sure. And we get together and we have meals sometimes. And then when it gets closer to luau, we start practicing for luau. We help set up and all of that. So I think it's pretty neat.
Yeah, and it's something, as we mentioned, this YouTube page that has all the past shows. We did talk to your teammate Kayla and one of the football players, Mel Ho'omanovanui, about luau because at the time we talked to them it was the first or second week of our show. And we were missing out on luau, which is a big Hawaii Club event, big on campus event, probably the biggest event on campus, arguably. So if you want to know more about luau, certainly go back and watch that interview at youtube.com/lcpios. And do want to mention tomorrow at instagram.com/lcpiosvb. Ka'anel Okapu'uvai is going to share culture of Hawaii and her Instagram takeover, which again, kudos to you and your team, because I know a lot of you have been doing the Instagram takeovers and really giving us a glimpse into your team culture, which we certainly appreciate. Certainly looking forward to Anela's story tomorrow. Let's segue from being on the court to some of the academics then. What's really stood out? You just recently declared rhetoric and media studies. What's kind of stood out from your academic experience so far?
Yeah, so far I haven't really like gotten into my major yet. I kind of finished all of like the math and the sciences so far, but I also chose Lewis and Clark because of the small class sizes. I feel like I work better in a small class size where my teacher knows who I am and I can go into office hours and get the help that I need. And I've met a lot of other rhetoric and media studies majors, and I know some that graduated as well. And the things that they are doing is like things that I would like to do. And so I'm really excited to dive more deeper into rhetoric and media studies this upcoming semester. And yeah.
Well, that's one of my favorite parts about the sophomore to junior transition too. You do start to get into some more of those major classes, but you've also been fortunate too to have an internship this past summer. What's it been, and what have you taken away from it?
Yeah, so I was interning with Scoring Live. It's like a high school sports media company here that covers all our high school sports. Um, and I got the opportunity to write some articles for their website. I was supposed to be covering the softball championships as well as the water polo, but because of COVID, things got kind of crazy, and so it just became a remote internship, which was totally fine because I've learned so much. And Brian Ing, the coordinator of this whole sports media company, he's really been super helpful in helping me figure out exactly how things work in this industry, and I'm really enjoying it so far.
Well, and you've been super valuable to our PioStream team. I can tell you that firsthand. I'm excited to see how you progress in sports media. Let's close with this. It's going to be an odd fall yet again. In fact, you are not going to be on campus, which I imagine going a full year without being at your college is certainly going to be an odd feeling. What are your plans? Kind of elaborate how you're going to stay in touch with your team, what you're going to be doing as a remote student for the fall.
Yeah, so Emily has us in little mini teams, so it's like four or three of us in each group. And so we do a bunch of like Zoom calls, we have meetings. I'm planning on staying in touch a whole lot more. And I know I'm going to miss it because I haven't been there since December and it feels weird to be home so long. But I'm also going to take advantage of being here and getting everything ready for the spring and for the spring season and just staying in shape and getting as much touches as I can.
Well, good luck.
Thank
I
you.
miss having you on campus. I miss your whole team being on campus, and certainly am eager for when the pandemic is behind us with as many people as safe as possible. Michelle McGinn, thanks so much for joining us this morning, and we look forward to seeing you as soon as we can.
Thank you.
That's Michelle McGinn joining us on lcpioneers.com live. Yeah, as I mentioned, she has worked with our PioStream crew and was one of those students who, shows up and pretty much everyone who works for PioStream is thrown into a job working a camera or helping keep track of something operationally at the table. And there's very little time with the school and some of the events not coinciding with their starts. I mean, in the fall, especially with the fall athletes like Michelle, typically on campus earlier than the start of school. They're in training camp and such. There's just not a lot of extra time for the student athletes who are there ahead of time. So you get into, competition dates that start a couple days before or during that first weekend of school. And it's like, hey, you're going to learn this job on the fly. And Michelle was great for us because she picked up a lot of the jobs that we were giving her right away and has been super valuable. In fact, when she was going overseas for the spring, we were missing out on having her help. So excited to have her back as soon as we all can be safely back on campus. And to be specifically with the COVID, and as she described the spring season, we didn't mention in the course of the interview, but the Northwest Conference has postponed, and there will be no fall competition for football, women's soccer, volleyball, or women's rowing as a conference sport. And so they will be competing. The plan is to try to set them up with having spring competition. And as such, she talked about trying to stay in shape and get ready for the upcoming spring season. And certainly it's a whole new challenge, and documenting that will certainly be part of what we do in my office is trying to tell the stories of how everyone continued to be in as normal of a collegiate athletics situation in the most unnormal of circumstances. So kudos to Michelle for continuing to handle all of this adversity, going from being overseas and having a great part of her overseas study experience cut short to now possibly being a full year until she's back on campus. That's kind of a crazy story. So wish her the best, and appreciate everyone who has stayed in touch with this show over the course of now, wow, 20 weeks, believe it or not. It's the first of 3 live shows this week. We do have to take Thursday off because of some other work that we're doing. So we will have a live show tomorrow with Francesca Span. She is the interim director of new student orientation at Lewis and Clark. So we are excited to get a glimpse into how they've also adjusted the way that NSO will go with having a pandemic still active. And then Sam Helms of baseball will join us, a rising senior for the Pioneers, on Friday. And his journey will be interesting too, because he'll be stopping to talk to us for our segment somewhere between his transition from Arizona back to Portland, as he will be on campus this fall. So excited to kind of have him pull over and give us 15 minutes of his time. We'll do that on Friday. So excited for our remaining guests, as I was with Michelle. Today, we will re-air Charlie Morgan's interview with us, a former Lewis and Clark rower. I want to say off the top of my head, class of 2008. He'll be joining us on a re-air this Thursday, so look forward to that as well. Until then, thanks for joining us. I'm Ryan Goff. Big thanks again to Michelle McGinn as well. We appreciate having fun with us on this Tuesday. You can see us live Tuesday through Friday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific time at lcpioneers.com/live, and also archived at youtube.com/lcpios. So until we talk to you again tomorrow, we appreciate you joining us. Have fun, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Goodbye, everybody.
I'm Casey Jones, and I teach a range of classes: general chemistry, organic chemistry, and also some advanced classes. And I have a research lab that currently I have 4 students working with me as part of the Rogers program. The summer experience is a way to get really deeply involved in the science that is here and be able to start to define what might be what you want to do next. So the brown bag gives our students a chance to explain their research and really show the context and the application of what they're doing to a very broad range of students and faculty.
It's interesting to be able to communicate to other scientists what your work is, and it forces you to learn how to talk about your subject so that not only experts in your field can understand it, but others can understand it as well, which I just believe is a good life skill.
To talk about your research in a way that anybody can understand it really is a valuable experience, and it's something that you don't get a lot of practice for except in these contexts, because oftentimes you're giving a presentation to a classroom filled with people who know basically the same things that you do, but in a brown bag, you have to be able to explain and provide motivation for everything that you're working on and why it's important and why it's relevant to be studying.